Hello everyone, and welcome to the third webinar of Cryptography, a short course presented by IT Masters on behalf of Charles Sturt University. My name is Guy Coward, and I'm IT Masters short course MC. Your mentor, as you now know, is Matt Constable, who thankfully hid Anne Lister's encoded diaries in late Victorian England after decoding them. Thank you all for making it, despite plonking another short course during a time zone change. It's our speciality. Before we begin, the usual housekeeping for Zoom doings. We encourage questions and the use of chat during the webinar, and we use two methods. We ask that you direct all questions relevant to course content to the Q&A section, and that you send all administration type and, I guess, augmenting discussion comments to the chat function. And you can also talk about the course details and resource availability and so on with Hannah. Please set your chat to everyone. Keeps everyone in the loop, and I guess maximizes the chance of you getting any simple questions or really fleshing out questions answered. We'll have Q&A sessions periodically, and I'll interrupt Matt if there's a particularly relevant question, and of course we'll have a Q&A session at the end. Thanks, Hannah, for joining us in the moderation role, and for looking after the course page, learn.itmasters.edu.au. So you can check out that page, everyone, for your readings and recordings and that sort of thing. All the quizzes. That's enough out of me for now. Please welcome Matt. How are you? What tales of the week?
Thank you, Guy. Welcome, everyone. Yeah, thank you, Guy, for that introduction again. You never cease to amaze me with the different ways you come up with each time we do one of these courses each week to inflate my limited abilities. And age. And age, indeed. So yes, thank you for that as ever. You maybe laugh out loud, so I'm glad I actually was on mute there.
Oh, good.
Just a note for everyone, that poll that Guy just put up there before, there will be a question on that in the exam. So make sure you jot it down. No, I'm joking. There's definitely not going to be a question on that. But there'll probably be someone similar. Anyway. Okay, welcome. So this week, to see another really positive roll-up as well this week. Lots of people here to have a look at asymmetric encryption. So last week, obviously, we looked at symmetric encryption. Now we go to its sort of slightly younger but bigger brother in asymmetric encryption. So we're going to I'm going to try and get through the boring part relatively quickly. And when I say boring, I mean, it's interesting information. There's lots of really good information in there. But what we really want to get to is actually doing some hands-on encryption and decryption with the RSA algorithm, okay, which you can actually do by hand. I'm just going to do it on the screen this evening, very, very simply with very, very small prime numbers, and I'll explain why when we get to that. But that's going to be the really interesting bit, and hopefully we'll generate some questions, but also get you enthusiastic for the activities that are available on Moodle, which I've done a little spreadsheet up there for you that's got some pre-filled values in it, and you can fiddle around putting some of your own prime numbers in and see how you can encrypt different messages as they go along. So it's quite interesting. So without further ado, let's crack on. So public key cryptography and RSA. So public key cryptography is built on asymmetric encryption, public and private key stuff, and RSA is one of the algorithms, really the main algorithm that we use. So in terms of our public key stuff, we need to get some terminology out of the way for a start. And it's all reasonably straightforward, but nevertheless important for you to get a grip on. So in comparison to last week, where we had symmetric encryption, which had one single key that was shared between sender and recipient, as a simple example, this week we talk about asymmetric keys, which are two keys. So there's two keys or a key pair related, involved in asymmetric encryption. And they are related and they are used to perform complementary operations. So what that means is what you encrypt with one, you can decrypt with the other. Now, in this particular case, if you remember back to last week, I said that symmetric encryption, the symmetric key, it was vitally important to keep that secret, okay? Because if someone has that, then, and they have knowledge of the algorithm you're using, and they have a bit of ciphertext, they can then bust open your encryption. With asymmetric encryption, you only need to keep one of the keys in the key pair as secret, and that's called the private key. So the two keys in the pair are called the public and private key. If I was to create my key pair, I would take the public key and I would publish it out on the internet or send it to whoever I wanted to, make it publicly available. And whoever wanted to encrypt something to me, they would use that public key to encrypt, and then they would send it to me. My private key is the only thing that can decrypt what's been encrypted with the public key. And that's why it's really important that I keep that private key secret, because if anyone's got that, they can then decrypt the communications to me. If we think about it in the opposite way, if I wanted to encrypt to someone who had my public key, or even if they didn't, I would send it to them, I would then encrypt with my private key, and only my public key would be able to decrypt it. So not only would it protect my communication, but it would also validate that that communication was from me, because only my private key could have encrypted it. Now, I know there'll be people that they're thinking, aha, how do we know, for example, that someone else hasn't generated a public-private key pair on my behalf, pretending to be me? And that's something that we sort of look at in one of the later slides, how we can confirm that a private and public key pair is actually of the identity that it expresses to be. Public key certificate. Okay, we'll have a little bit of a look at these, but not quite so much as we actually will look at the actual asymmetric keys and the encryption algorithm themselves. But basically, a public key certificate is a digital document that has been issued and digitally signed by the private key of a certification authority that binds the name of a subscriber to a public key. Okay, that's a mouthful, so there's a little bit to unpack there, which I'll do in a second. These certificates indicate the subscriber identified in the certificate has sole control and access to the corresponding private key. Okay, so this is how we prove that our private public keys are in fact our own. We use a thing called a public key certificate. That's part of this thing called PKI, or public key infrastructure, which we look at towards the back end of this evening. So the idea is that a certificate authority, so that's a server or an organization that has a bunch of certificate authority servers, and their job is to verify the creation of public-private key pairs. And they do this by asking a whole range of questions when you go to create a public-private key, and they ask you a whole heap of questions, and they verify your identity through a range of different methods, some of which we'll look at shortly. Once they've done that, they store the public key on their server, and anyone can come and get that public key, your public key, from it. When they send out the public key, they do what's called sign it. So they sign it using the private key of the actual issuing certificate authority. And that key, those keys, their key pair, the certificate authority's key pair, are so well known and trusted that it's taken as a big gold or a big elephant stamp to say, yes, whatever comes from this certificate authority is on the level. We know it's correct. And so if I store my public key on that certificate authority, when someone comes to get it, the certificate authority will sign it on my behalf, and they will say, I have verified that this is actually Matt Constable's public key, and you can be sure that if you encrypt with that public key, only he will be able to decrypt it with his private key. So that's where public key certificates and digital signatures are really, really important in keeping the integrity and the legitimacy of our asymmetric system and our PKI at the top level. So the public key or asymmetric cryptographic algorithm is simply an algorithm that facilitates encryption and decryption using private public keys. That's really as difficult as it gets. And then PKI, or public key infrastructure, is a set of policies, processes, different types of server platforms, software and hardware. It says workstations, but basically hardware, which is used to administer the certificates and public-private key pairs that everyone generates and publishes to them. And this includes the ability to issue those public and private keys, to maintain them, and then revoke them in case something becomes broken with them or they become compromised in some way. So that's sort of how everything fits together in a nice, neat way. The concept of public key cryptography evolved from an attempt to attack the most difficult problems that are associated with the symmetric encryption, which we spoke about last week. Firstly, and we've already identified this through what we've spoken about already, is how do we secure communications in general without having to trust a key distribution center with your key? So in symmetric encryption, we can either share it independently or we can use a key distribution center. Now, of course, we have to have some sort of trust in that particular entity, and we have to be assured that it hasn't been compromised itself in order for that process to work. And so asymmetric encryption deals with that particular problem. And the second one is digital signatures, and that is, how do we verify that a message comes intact from the client sender? So in other words, how do we verify that a encrypted piece of ciphertext that we receive actually comes from the person that we think it's come from? And they're two really important problems with symmetric encryption that asymmetric encryption addresses. A couple of fellows called Whitfield, Diffie, and Martin-Hellman, who were lecturers at Stanford Uni, achieved a breakthrough in 1976. So what's that, 45 years ago? And they came up with a method called the Diffie-Hellman algorithm, which we're going to look at briefly towards the end, that addressed both these problems, and it was radically different from all the other previous approaches that have been used to try and protect against these two things. So Diffie-Hellman, really important to remember those names. They've been very significant. Okay, public key systems. What are the ingredients of a public key system? Pretty simple. We have a plain text, which is our readable message. We have an encryption algorithm, which performs transformations on the plain text. So it could be a substitution, it could be a transposition, it could be a combination of those, as we saw with AES. It does lots of different funky things with a piece of plain text in order to spit out the ciphertext. Asymmetric then takes that to a different level again. We then have the public key, which can be used, as we said before, for both encryption or decryption. Same with the private key. So we've got our key pair, public-private key. These are used for encryption or decryption as well. But the private key has to remain secret. So that's, for instance, with my asymmetric system, my private key is in my possession only. No one else knows that. But the public key, doesn't matter who knows that, because it allows people to send me encrypted messages. We, of course, have the ciphertext, which is the result of the combination of the plain text and the public or private key being passed through the encryption algorithm. And then, of course, at the other end, we have to have the decryption algorithm, which is in effect the same algorithm, just run in reverse, if you want to think about it logically in that particular fashion. This is a little bit of a graphic which sort of gives you a bit of an idea of how it all hangs together. And it's not actually that different from symmetric encryption in terms of the overall process, the simplified process, other than to say, of course, that there are now two keys rather than one. So we have our plain text and we put it into our encryption algorithm. In this case, RSA. This is Bob. Bob's our sender. Okay, so he puts his plain text into RSA and he adds Alice's public key to it because he wants to send the communication to Alice.
Could you say it again, please?
Now, as you can see here, Bob has a number of public keys on his public key ring. Alice is one of them. So he pops Alice into the encryption algorithm with a plain text, comes out with a ciphertext. Don't worry too much about the formulas at the moment because we'll go through that in more detail shortly. Then he transmits that to Alice. On the other end, she passes it through the decryption algorithm, which again is RSA, puts her private key in this time, and gets the plain text out the other side. So that's encryption with a public key. Bob is encrypting with Alice's public key. Only Alice can decrypt because she's the only one with a private key. On the other side of it, we can also encrypt with a private key. So in this case up here, the only thing that tells Alice that this is from Bob is via the medium protect. So say if, let's say Bob emails it to her, emails an encrypted message to her. The only way that Alice knows it's from Bob is because it comes from Bob's email address, for example. But there's nothing in the cryptography which suggests that it's come from Bob because he's just encrypted it with her public key and sent it to Alice. In this communication down here, Bob encrypts the plain text with his private key. So ostensibly, according to the rules, if Bob's been a good boy and kept his private key private, then he's the only one that can use that private key to encrypt the message. So when it's transmitted to Alice, it doesn't matter how it gets there. It could be from any generic email, it could be she downloaded it from a website, got it by FTP, whatever, it doesn't matter. If she can decrypt it with Bob's public key and she's assured of the validity of that public key, then she knows that that communication must have originated with Bob. And so it proves that Bob sent the communication to her. So there's a couple of different ways in which you can look at it. Either way though, the private key must be kept secret. All right, conventional, so symmetric versus public key, asymmetric. So symmetric versus asymmetric. If we look at conventional or symmetric encryption, in order to work, we just need a single key and an algorithm that is used for both encryption and decryption. Both the key and the algorithm must be shared securely. So what that means is we have to notify our recipients of what algorithm we're going to use confidentially. It doesn't mean it can't be guessed, okay, because there's only a limited number of algorithms. But most importantly, our key has to remain secret, okay? We already know that. In terms of asymmetric encryption, we have two keys and algorithms used for encryption and decryption. So we don't really have two algorithms. We still use the same algorithm, but we have two keys, public and private. And encryption or decryption, as we just saw, can be done with either one. The sender and receiver must each have a different one of the matched paired keys. So it's no good, for example, if I try to encrypt with my public key and send it to you and you try to decrypt it with my public key. That's not going to work. Or vice versa, if I have my private key and I send you my private key by mistake, you still, you won't be able to decrypt what I'm sending to you. So you must have my public key, I must have my private key. They have to be different, otherwise it won't work. In terms of what we need for security, in symmetric encryption, key secrecy, absolutely vital. Whereas for asymmetric encryption, we only need the secrecy of one key. In fact, it doesn't work if both keys are secret, but we must have secrecy of the private key. With symmetric encryption, if an attacker or anyone doesn't know what the key is, then the algorithm, so the symmetric encryption, must be computationally infeasible at minimum to decrypt the ciphertext. So what that means is if someone doesn't know the key, it must be virtually impossible for them to decrypt the ciphertext. Whereas with asymmetric encryption, you have to know both keys. So without knowing both keys, the algorithm must be strong enough that it's virtually impossible to decrypt the ciphertext. So in this case, they need at a minimum both keys. In this one, they only need the one key. So there's that obviously elevated level of security. Knowledge of the algorithm plus the ciphertext cannot result in finding the key. So what that means is symmetric encryption must be written The algorithm must be designed so that if you do have knowledge of the algorithm plus the ciphertext, you can't reverse engineer it to find out what the key was. Similarly, with asymmetric, if you have the algorithm, one key plus the ciphertext, you can't stick it all together somehow and come back and find the other key. So for example, we know someone is intercepting a transmission between myself and Guy. They know we're using RSA. They've got my public key, which they know is going to be involved in it, and they've got some ciphertext. There's no way that they can put those three things together and then find out what my private key is. Okay, so that's the way these systems are designed. And if they don't meet those requirements, then they're a pretty poor encryption algorithm. Right, so how do we apply this in a little bit more detail? So public key systems or asymmetric systems can be categorized as one of the following, or used in one of the following ways, really, is what it should be saying. So we can encrypt or decrypt. So this is a sender encrypts a message with the recipient's public key, and they decrypt it with their private key, or vice versa. They encrypt it with their private key, and the recipient decrypts it with the corresponding public key. They can also be used for digital signatures, where a sender signs a message with their private key, and when the message gets to the other end, that signature is compared or looked at within light of the public key, and if they match, then we know that that message is has been signed and we know who it's come from. We can also use it for key exchange. Two sides cooperate to exchange a session key. Okay, key exchange. So this is where we start to talk about using Diffie-Hellman as an asymmetric algorithm to protect our symmetric key in transit. And this is actually what happens in, say, a VPN environment. So say, and this, I'll start to get a bit excited here because this is my first love, really, from an IT perspective, and that is VPN tunnels. Okay, we've got two Cisco routers with a VPN tunnel nailed up between them. When that tunnel first comes up, when it's first established, because tunnels can go up and down, yeah? Now, the idea is we want to keep it up all the time, but, reboots happen, interfaces go down, ISPs have failures, all that sort of jazz. So sometimes the tunnel has to come up again. When that tunnel is first initiated, Diffie-Hellman, in a lot of, not all cases, but in a lot of cases, Diffie-Hellman, which is asymmetric, is used to take the symmetric key, package it all up in a private message, send it across to the other side, where the other side verifies that that symmetric, so decrypts it, if you like, with Diffie-Hellman, looks at the symmetric key, confirms that it's the same symmetric key that it has, and then the tunnel can come up once that key is agreed. Now, that's really, really simplifying the process, but in a nutshell, that's what happens. So Diffie-Hellman is used to protect that exchange of the symmetric key in that particular example, and lots of other examples as well. So there's no need to, shout it over a megaphone across the top of a building, or send it by a sneaker net, or carrier pigeon or smoke signals potentially, although that'd probably work nowadays anyway. No one would be able to decrypt them. There's a number of different ways you could potentially do it that are not protected. Obviously, lots of different ways. Diffie-Hellman is one of the few ways that you can do it in a protected way. So now some of our algorithms can be used for all three of these things here, and others might only be used for one or two. So if we look at this nice little table here, which gives an example.
Before we do that, Matt,
yeah, go ahead.
First of all, my Morse code is terrible, but I imagine that will be another one.
Yeah, of course, could be.
Yeah, we're getting a few people wondering if you can perhaps jiggle your mic again. We're having a few different experiences of your audio.
Okay.
As far as I can tell, it's fine. We'll see if we can just improve it a little bit.
Okay. All right. I'll probably try to stay a bit still. Oh, we've got Elon Musk here. Excellent. Yeah, I'll try and stay a bit still. I get a bit excited when I talk about these things. Right.
No worries. And also people were very worried. Is there someone in the room with you The recording's coming from inside. Or was that Siri?
No, that was Siri.
Okay.
I've actually, yes, I've actually turned her off now.
Okay.
Occasionally, for whatever reason, she pops up. So I've turned her off now. So yeah, apologies for that. There is no one else in the room.
That's fine. Something NSA was in the chat, so it's all very exciting.
No, not quite as good as that. Although there might be, I wouldn't know if they were.
Oh no. Good luck.
I don't think they'll be looking at anything I'm doing. Well, I hope not. Yeah, we digress. So if we have a look at this table now, which shows 4 of the more common public key systems. So we have RSA, elliptical curve, which so RSA we're going to talk about in lots more detail. Elliptical curve, not so much, but that gives us room to expand with maybe another course later on down the track, or leaves it open for you to explore ITC 593. Diffie-Hellman, we're going to have a quick look at, and DSS, which we don't look at. And if you look at these things here, you can see that RSA can be used for all 3 of those purposes. So encryption and decryption, digital signatures, and key exchange. So it gets a big tick. Elliptical curve is the same. Diffie-Hellman is only used for key exchange, like the example that I gave. And then DSS is only used for digital signatures, which sort of is given away by the fact that it's yes. So, public key requirements. Now we're starting to get into a little bit of heavy stuff for the next couple of slides, just getting through the formulas and that until we actually get to the good stuff. I promise it's coming. It's coming. So, what must we have with an asymmetric encryption system? First of all, it has to be computationally easy to generate a key pair. So we've got to be able to generate our key pairs easily without too much issue. Otherwise, what's the point? It needs to be computationally easy for a sender who knows the public key and the message to be encrypted to then generate the corresponding ciphertext. So you've got to be able to, if you've got a public key and you've got a plain text message you want to encrypt, it's got to be easy for you to encrypt it. It also has to be computationally easy for the receiver to then take that ciphertext and using their private key to decrypt it to recover the original message, right? And pretty obvious, otherwise you don't have that communication and it all goes pear-shaped. However, it also needs to be computationally infeasible for an adversary or attacker or hacker or whatever you want to call them, that if they know the public key, to then determine the private key. And that goes back to what we just said on a couple of slides previously. It also must be computationally infeasible for an adversary or attacker or hacker who knows the public key and has ciphertext to then recover the original message, or indeed work out what the private key is. Again, going back, just reiterating what we said a couple of slides back. And of course, it's important that both keys can be applied in either order. So that is, we can decrypt and encrypt with either key, it doesn't matter. Okay, in terms of attacking them, a public key encryption scheme is vulnerable to brute force attacks. Okay, so the countermeasure to this, and you'll see this sort of comes out a little bit in my demo. The countermeasure to this is use large keys. So the longer the key length, the more difficult it is to crack. And indeed, I think I'll make mention of a challenge in a few slides' time, and if I don't, I'll bring it up anyway, which will sort of illustrate that point. The key size has to be small enough, however, for practical encryption and decryption, because all this encryption and decryption with asymmetric algorithms is based on prime numbers, and we know that numbers can go from integers can go from 0 to infinity and beyond, to paraphrase someone. And so prime numbers can get massively huge, and trying to put a couple of prime numbers together to encrypt something, results in the requirement for a lot of processing power and a lot of speed in your hardware or your software in order to make that happen. So we have to have a key size that's small enough to still enable current systems to be able to do that, while being large enough to prevent people from being able to brute force it. The key sizes that have been proposed result in encryption and decryption speeds that are too slow for general purpose use. So it's not necessarily something you would use, say, in building a VPN tunnel, because you don't want all that information. You don't want RSA, a slow RSA algorithm, for example, slowing down your transmissions across a VPN tunnel, because it's having to encrypt and decrypt using these massive numbers for protection. And that's why we use asymmetric encryption to hide the secrecy of our symmetric keys. But then when we build our VPN tunnels, we use symmetric key encryption because it's a heck of a lot quicker. Public key encryption is currently confined to key management and signature applications. So we don't generally use it for real-time transmission protection of traffic. So in other words, VPN type technologies, we don't generally use it because it's just too slow. We can certainly use it to say encrypt emails or to encrypt files, or we can do, as we said, use it for key management, so Diffie-Hellman in that regards, or RSA, or we're using it to provide digital signatures, absolutely. But for real-time transmission of data, not so good, too slow. Another form of attack is to find some way to compute the private key given the public key. To date, it hasn't been mathematically proven that this form of attack is infeasible for a particular public key algorithm. So it's possible, but very, very unlikely. It hasn't been proven that it's infeasible, but it's difficult, very difficult. And then lastly, there's a probable message attack, which is just about having an understanding of what could be in the message and using that as a bit like they did with Enigma, using that as a way to try to guess, if you like, or break down the actual encryption. And again, this is a pretty difficult thing to do, but it's thwarted, as they say, lovely word, thwarted, by appending random bits to simple messages. So just put padding basically on the end to fill out things to make it seem more difficult than it actually is. So the RSA algorithm, getting closer to the good stuff. These three fine gentlemen here are in fact the R, the S, and the A. So Shamir, Rivest, Shamir, and Adleman. So factoring is an important concept within the RSA algorithm. So we need to think about it for a moment. So if we take 24 as an example, how many different ways can we factor 24? So if we just divide it by 2 for a start, we come up with 12. So 24 divided by 2 gives us 12. So that's one factor. We then divide it by 2 again and we get 6. So this time we've done 2, divide by 2 gives 6. Divide by 2, divide by 2, divide by 2 again gives us 3. We divide by 2, by 2, by 2, and then by 3, and we're left with 1. This down here now represents what's called a prime factorization, because it's as far as we can go. We can only ever go to 1, as far as we can go. So in this case, 24 can be factored in this particular way. There are other ways. We can divide by 6 or 4. We can also do, but at the end, we're always going to arrive at 1. So that's one particular way we can factor 24. Oh, turn off laser pointer. There we go. Okay, let's take a larger number, 116. And we go through the same process of factorization. So we divide by 2, we're left with 128. We divide that by 2, 54, divide by 2, 27. Can't divide that by 2 equally. So we divide by 3, we give us 9. We divide by 3 again, we get to 3. We divide it by 3 again, we get to 1. Okay, so that then gets to our prime factorization for 216. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 6 steps. Now, of course, we can do the same to gargantuan numbers, you know, millions, billions, trillions. It just takes more time. What about 4,183? Okay, now I'm not going to sit here and do it because you'd all fall asleep, but it's suffice to say it's not so easy. Well, we can do it because it's only 4,183, and we could sit here and we could go through divide by 2, divide by, or divide by whatever the biggest factor is first, and away we go. So we could do it, but it would be difficult. And this is actually, okay, that was a bit misleading, wasn't it? The reason this one is so difficult, I'll think of a different example. The reason this one is so difficult is because 4183 is actually the product of two prime numbers, right? 47 and 89. So our previous technique would take a while to work out. Okay, we couldn't do it to say, all right, let's divide it by 2. Let's divide by, because you can't divide 4183 by 2. You could try 3, you could try 4, you could try 5, you could try 6. Eventually, you're going to get to 47, and you're going to, it's the first time you're actually going to be able to divide. So you could eventually do it, but it'll take us a while to work through that, unless, of course, you just happen to guess, well, let's start at 47 or start at 89. And there's probably people listening who may have actually picked that up straight away. I don't know. If you have, I bow down to you. Factoring, therefore, isn't as easy as it first seems, and this is where the strength in RSA lies. And because they use massive prime numbers, so a prime number, remember, is a number that is only really divisible by itself or 1 evenly, so nothing else can divide it. And so using those really large prime numbers makes factorization of the keys very, very, very difficult. So if, for example, we were trying to generate keys without using prime numbers, then things would fall apart very easily indeed. It'd be quite easy to just use basic mathematics that anyone could do to be able to find out what was going on. So here it is. This is what I was going to talk about. RSA challenge, which ran from 1991 to 2007. So the guys that came up with RSA decided that they'd run a little bit of a challenge and say, all right, what's the longest possible key length that we could use? They defined a number of different key lengths, quite a lot of key lengths, and said to people, all right, see if you can break these. So I can't remember what the key length started at, but for example, RSA 200 has a public key 200 digits long. Okay, so it's 200 base 10 digits long. Of course, this is, you've converted into binary, as we spoke about last week, to be able to factor it. And RSA 200 actually uses these two prime numbers here. Okay, as you can see, and really, they're not even prime numbers that are really that big. Okay, they're not really that huge. But RSA 200 was successfully broken. Someone actually worked out how to factor, worked out the two numbers that were multiplied together to get that public key. Pretty impressive. So that was 200 digits long. RSA 2048. So 2048 is the number of bits, but it's 617 digits long. Okay, so that's basically it there. There was a 200, well, I've got a zero missing there, $200,000 US reward offered to anyone who can break that. And that is still unfactored at the end of the challenge in 2007. And in fact, it's still unfactored now. So no one has been able to factorize this particular public key. So I haven't been able to find out what two prime numbers we used to create this public key. So it's pretty impressive. It's been since 1991. So it's 30 years and still no one has been able to break it. So, and as I think we said in week 1, secure today does not mean secure forever, but it's doing a pretty good job as it is now. All right, so RSA, Rivest-Shamir-Adleman, developed in 1977 at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and is now the most widely used general purpose approach to public key encryption. It's a cipher in which plaintext and ciphertext are integers between 0 and n-1 for some number of n. And we'll sort of look at what that sort of means as we go on the next few pages. A typical size for n is 1024 bits, so it's a typical key size, or 309 decimal digits. Realistically though, if we use a modulus less than 2048, it's deemed to be not secure. But if it's 2048 or greater, then it's deemed to be secure at the current time with current technology. Now, RSA makes use of an expression with exponentials, and we'll see what that means shortly. Plain text is encrypted in blocks, with each block having a binary value less than some number. So M must be less than N. And this is important for later when we look at our example and when you look at the example in the spreadsheet that I've got up on Moodle, because there's certain cases in which, now I'll do a demonstration later on, but there's certain cases in which the encryption will break down if your number is not larger than the message itself, the message number. And I'll explain in more detail what that means when we get to the example. Encryption and decryption are one of the following forms. So for some plain text called M and a cipher text called C. So the cipher text equals a plain text raised to the encryption key mod N. Okay, so we're doing our modular mathematics again, where we're dividing by this key length, and whatever the remainder is what the ciphertext is. The plain text message, if you want to get that back, that equals the ciphertext raised to the decryption key. So it could be the public or private, depending on which way you're going to do it. Modular N, which then factors out to M ED mod N. Both sender and receiver must know the value of N, so they've got to be using the same key size. The sender knows the value of E, so the encryption key, whether that's public or private, and the receiver knows the value of D. Again, the decryption key, public or private, depending on which way we're going. So a public key encryption algorithm with a public key of PU equals EN, and a private key of PR equals DN. So all that's saying is D is, in this case, talking about the private key, E is in talking about the public key. To be useful for encryption, it must be possible to find the values of E, D, and N such that the message raised to the power of the encryption or decryption key mod N is equal to the message being less than N. Again, this will show you what that means in a second. It also has to be relatively simple to calculate both the encrypted plain text mod N and decryption mod N of the ciphertext for all values of message text which are less than N. So what that basically means is it's got to be simple to encrypt and decrypt for all the valid values of N. It is infeasible to determine the decryption key given the encryption key and the algorithm, or the key, the key length, which we've already sort of spoken about. Key generation. Okay, before the application of the public key crypto system, each participant must generate a pair of keys. So we need to find two prime numbers, preferably really big ones, and we call them P and Q. We then select either the encryption or decryption key, and we calculate the other. And we'll see in our example how we do that. As the value of N equals P times Q will be known to any potential adversary, chosen primes must be from a sufficiently large set. So we know that N will equal P times Q. So if we don't have if we have two tiny numbers, tiny prime numbers, it becomes really easy to break and guess. The methods for finding each large primes must be efficient. So we've got to be really efficient at being able to generate these large primes. So this is sort of a bit of a nutshell on what we've spoken about. So if Alice wants to generate a key, she has to select NQ, which are both prime, and P cannot equal Q. So we don't use the same prime number. So 3, for example, we wouldn't use 3 times 3. That would be ridiculous. We then calculate the value of N, which is the multiplication of the two prime numbers together. We then calculate something called the phi number, which is basically P minus 1 multiplied by Q minus 1. And we'll see where that comes in a minute. We then select the integer or the encryption key based on the following parameters. Okay, so phi of N and E must equal 1, and E has to be greater than 1 but less than the phi of n. If it's not, then it's not going to, the mathematics aren't going to work. We then calculate our other key based on this particular formula here, and then we end up at the public and private key, which of course is E, so that's this through this formula here, and N calculated from up here. The private key is D calculated here, and N calculated up there. Now, encryption by Bob with Alice's public key, the important thing to remember is that whatever Bob encrypts, it must be less than the value of N. And we'll see why that's important in a minute. The ciphertext formula is there. Again, we'll go through that in our example, and we decrypt using the opposite method. Okay, so the security of RSA. Let's get through this quickly. There are 5 possible approaches to attacking RSA. So they are hardware fault-based attacks, which involves actually introducing hardware faults into the machine or the device that is generating the digital signatures. We can do the chosen ciphertext attack. So in this case, we are trying to exploit properties of the actual algorithm itself. We can do a brute force attack, which involves trying all the possible private keys. If you've got 2 big prime numbers, good luck with that attackers. There's mathematical attacks, several approaches, but all equivalent in effort to trying to factor the public key into its separate primes. So trying to find out what P and Q are basically. And then the timing attacks, which is really dependent on how long it takes for the algorithm to decrypt the ciphertext and making some assumptions or finding out some information about key length and algorithm use based on the timing of the actual decryption process, which again is quite a complex thing to try to do. Breaking RSA, classical computing. So computers that we have now, systems that we have now, would potentially take around 300 trillion years to break RSA 2048. So I'll let you think about that. It brings new meaning to the phrase computationally infeasible. 300 trillion years. No, I'm not that old guy.
I was going to say it's advantage those that accept immortality at 90.
It does, indeed. We might actually live to see the breaking of RSA 248. However, apparently, theoretically, a quantum computer with 4,099 perfectly stable qubits could break RSA 2048 in 10 seconds. However, unfortunately, we don't have a quantum computer that's anywhere near that in existence at the moment. So it's currently available, has less than 80 qubits. I think it's around about 76 or 78 or something like that. So it's nowhere near. And in addition, these qubits are not perfectly stable, which they would have to be in order for us to break it in this 10-second time. But certainly, there are also additional issues with coherence time, but we're talking about some stuff that's way out of the scope of this course and indeed way out of the scope of the capacity of my cranium. So let's have, this is going to be interesting. I just hope this works. I hope I don't mess something up here. So we're going to try and do some RSA by hand. And this is what you guys are actually going to try to attempt using the spreadsheet that's up on Moodle. So hopefully this works and hopefully you find it fascinating because it's quite interesting, even if you're not into maths. All right, so we've got to generate our keys, right? So the first thing we need to do is we need to pick some prime numbers. Now, normally we want these to be as big as possible, but because my brain is small and I can't comprehend using massive primes, I'm going to use small primes. So 3 and 11. Now, I've got the note on primitive 1. If you remember back to week 1, primitive 1 was a generation of random numbers, okay? This is what we use random generation of numbers for, to generate these big primes, because as humans, we would take a very long time to come up with these. So I've chosen a P of 3 and a Q of 11. And we multiply these together, as we saw in the previous formulas, to get the value for n. So 3 times 11, 33, okay? Pretty easy, right? We then have to calculate this thing called the phi function, or Euler's quotient. And we simply do that by P minus 1 multiplied by Q minus 1. So brackets just mean multiply, yeah? So 3 minus 1 is 2, 11 minus 1 is 10, multiply the two together, and you're left with 20 for your phi function. Right, this is where it starts to get a bit more interesting. We now have to calculate our encryption key, but we have to think about it in two ways. There's two things we have to do. First of all, we have to choose an encryption key is greater than 1, because if it was 1, that would be a pretty easy bit of mathematics there. But it's also got to be less than the phi function. So it's got to be less than 20 in this particular case, right? In addition, it has to be co-prime with n, the phi of n. So it has to be co-prime with both 33 and 20. So what this means is numbers are co-prime if they don't share a common factor other than 1, because everything can be divided by 1. So I've then written down this nice little table to the right here, filled out our values. So because our phi function is 20, I wrote down all the values between 1 and 20. Pretty straightforward. And this is another reason why we use small numbers in these examples. So we've got to pick the encryption number. So we're looking for our encryption key now, because we've already got our other one. It's co-prime with n, which is 33, and the phi function, which is 20. So we have to find a number that doesn't share any common factors other than 1 with 33 and 20 from these values here. So we don't care about 1, because it's obviously common. The red numbers, I've done the work for you, are not co-prime. So that is, these red numbers share some factor with either 33 or 20 other than 1. And in, so for example, 2 obviously shares an additional factor of 1 with 20, which is of course itself 2. Same with 3, it shares a factor itself with 33. 4 can be divisible by 2, which of course is a factor also of 20. So the red numbers rule themselves out. The blue numbers, however, is what we're looking for. They're the numbers that are co-prime. They're the numbers that don't share any common factor with 33 or 20. And I'm just thinking, no, that's right, that is right, yes. Oh. I made a mistake there, but I hadn't, I was mistaken. All right, so continuing on. To make things simple for ourselves, we're going to use 7 because it's the lowest number we can pick, and that therefore makes our maths really easy, because I don't want to have to sit here and use a calculator.
Yeah, and then we're getting some people saying 11 should be red.
Ah, well, that's what I was thinking. 11 should be red as well, because it's, yes, indeed, bigger, because that's what I was thinking. So 7, 13, 17, and 9. So I've missed that one there. Apologies for that. But 7 is definitely co-prime, and that's the one we're going to use because it's easier for our maths. So next slide. Now what do we have to do? Now we have to choose the decryption key. So we've got our n, which is 33. We've got our encryption key, which we've picked from 7, based on the fact that it has to be larger than 1 and less than the phi of n, and also has to be co-prime, etc., etc., etc. And then we have to choose the decryption key such that d mod phi n equals 1. Okay, so what that basically means is we have to find d, so we have to transpose this particular formula, and it's done in the spreadsheet for you, but I haven't done it here. Basically, this table here is all the values of for d based on these values here, 7 and the phi of n, which is 20. Okay, so this is a table which has got all those numbers already in there. And hopefully what you'll notice is that they repeat. At a certain stage, they start to repeat. So we've got 0, 7, 14, 1, 8, 15, 2, 9, 16, 3, 10. But you can read, but you can see they at some stage, when they get back to 0, they will then start to repeat. And that's a mathematical function based on the values that will change based on the values that you pick for your prime numbers. So obviously, if you've got some really large prime numbers, it's going to have a lot of values in between the repeats. So it becomes more difficult to analyze even from that perspective. Now, we're going to keep it simple again, and we will choose the number 3. Now, I know we're saying 3, it's a third position, but our numbering starts at 0. So if we've got position 0, 1, 2, 3, that's where number 3 will come from. So the first one is in the third position, assuming that numbers start at 0. And in this case, I've gone up and down columns, so gone from top to bottom rather than left to right. So our public key then becomes P and N, which is 7, which we chose on the last slide, and 33. And our private key becomes 3, which we've just chosen, and 33, which is our value for N. So now we're ready to encrypt and decrypt. The math now is pretty simple. From our previous slides, we know that encryption uses this formula, decryption uses this formula. And we also now have the required keys. So let's get on with it. We have the plain text, or M, equals to secret. Now, before we can encrypt it though, we need to convert to numbers. So we need to convert our secret to decimal numbers. So if we just really simply, and we write our alphabet, and then underneath it, we assign them each individual numbers, secret becomes, S becomes 19, E becomes 5, C becomes 3, so on and so forth. So in decimal, we have 19, 5, 3, 18, 5, and 20 is our plain text message. Now, of course, in real encryption algorithms, they then convert that to binary and do it based on that. But we're just going to keep it decimal because we work better in decimal. So now we can encrypt. And we do that using this. So we use the formula ciphertext equals the plain text raised to the power of our encryption key, mod n. Public key or encryption key is 7 and 13. So our encryption looks like this. So we have our alphanumeric code secret. We have our plain text, our decimal digits, which we've just come up with. We then have the decimal digit raised to the power of the encryption key. And then we do our modular mathematics with n. So what that's saying is we're dividing this value by 33, because that's our n value, and we're writing down what the remainder is. So this number divided by 33 leaves 13 behind, and so on. This number divided by 33 leaves 14. This number divided by 33 leaves 9, so on and so forth. And then this value becomes our ciphertext. So our ciphertext then becomes 13, 14, 9, 6, 14, and 26. So that's secret in ciphertext. So if we were then to go back and compare that to the values in our alphabet table, so here, we would then find that it would come up with something nonsensical that would make sense to us. So that's pretty easy. And I've had a bit of a trick here. The good thing about using, and you'll see, I think in the, I'll mention that in a minute. I was going to say, I think in the spreadsheet I used some different values, and it actually comes up with an N. One of the values I used came up with an N of, I can't remember, it was under 20 anyway. And so the encryption, once the plain text gets above whatever N is, then the encryption actually breaks. And so if you play around in the spreadsheet, you'll actually see that happening. So that's why it's not ideal with small primes, but it's good to give us the idea of what's going on. All right, so if we now decrypt, so we've got secret, our alpha, and we've transposed from this table, our ciphertext, and we've popped it into this column here. We then raise that ciphertext to the power of the decryption key, so in this case 3. We divide it by 33, and then whatever the remainder is what we've got left. Okay, so 2197 divided by 33 leaves us with 19, so on and so forth. Long story short, what we end up with is this, all in one place. So we start off with secret, we encrypt it. So, we've got our plain text values, we convert it into decimal, which would then also be it would be obviously converted into binary for the algorithm itself. That's what we get. We pass it through the encryption algorithm, raising it to the power of the encryption key, and use our modulus math, and we get the ciphertext. We then pass that through our decryption using our decryption key, and we yield the same plain text again, converting it from decimal back into alphanumeric alpha, and we get the same message, the same. So it proves that our encryption and decryption works from a mathematical viewpoint. Perfect, great. Nice, simple example that actually works. Try that with huge prime numbers and you'll have a lot more trouble doing it by hand. So now lastly, I just want to talk, before we get on to some other stuff, just want to talk quickly about Diffie-Hellman, because I spoke about RSA and done some RSA math to prove that that algorithm actually works. Diffie-Hellman is a different asymmetric encryption algorithm that we know from our table earlier on in the session this evening that it's only really used for key management. And it was in fact the first published public key algorithm. So before, because it was 76 before RSA 77. And there are lots of commercial products that use this as a key exchange system. So any of us that have worked on Cisco routers before and done VPN tunnels, in particular, Diffie-Hellman is one of the ways, one of the more popular ways of doing this exchange of keys. And the purpose of it is to enable the secure exchange of symmetric keys to be used for symmetric encryption. So in this case, we're building a VPN tunnel using symmetric encryption because it's faster. Our asymmetric key encryption is slow, but we use Diffie-Hellman in this case to protect our symmetric key while we are sharing it across our link. The algorithm itself, Diffie-Hellman that is limited to the exchange of secret values. Okay, so we encrypt something, we exchange it, decrypt it. That's its thing. That's what it's used for. It's just for key exchange. The effectiveness of it depends on the difficulty of computing discrete logarithms. Okay, so it's a logarithmic-based algorithm. If we look at a quick example using good old Bob and Alice again. So Alice and Bob share a prime Q and an alpha, such that the alpha is less than Q and alpha is a primitive root of Q, which is a pretty complex way of mathematically putting something. Anyway, we're sharing these two numbers, Q and alpha. Don't have to worry too much about the maths of it really, because we're looking at the Diffie-Hellman side of it, not the RSA. So Alice generates a private key, x to the a, such that xa is less than q. Alice then calculates a public key, ya, such that alpha to the x and a mod q multiplied by a mod q. Alice then and then sends that to Bob. Bob basically goes through the same process, sends that to Alice. Alice then calculates a shared secret key. Bob calculates the same shared secret key, and they've got their secret key. Okay, so it's been exchanged, it's been decrypted, it's understood, everyone's happy. So that's a pretty complex way of putting it, but that's why it works. So if we have a man in the middle attack, so we've got poor old Darth, he's always getting a bad rap. He actually wasn't that bad. So Darth is in between Alice and Bob. And what he's showing is he's trying to grab hold of these keys and he's trying to basically perform some sort of cryptanalysis attack on it. The point is, by the time he finds it, it doesn't really matter. It's computationally feasible. Being an asymmetric algorithm, we know the properties of an asymmetric algorithm require it to be easy to generate keys, but really difficult to find keys or factorize if we know, even if we know one key plus the ciphertext or any combination of the algorithm. So this is basically just showing that Arthur's sitting there in the middle, he intercepts the keys, can't get the head or tail out of them because it's just too damn difficult. He hasn't got...
Sucked in, Darth.
That's exactly right. He hasn't got his quantum computer with 4,099 stable qubits. He just can't do it in less than 300 trillion years.
Amateur.
Exactly. Amateur. You'd think a man who was capable of running the Death Star would be able to come up with a quantum computer with 4,099 qubits, but alas, he didn't get that far. So because of that, he's in a whole world of pain. He can't find it. He might as well, he's probably better off going to try and, attack Alice or Bob and trying to find out what their message is, because he's sure as heck not doing it through cryptanalysis. All right, that's Diffie-Hellman, really simple terms. So the key, there's that word again. The point to get out of that is that it's an asymmetric algorithm that's used just for key exchange. That's all it does. It's not useful for anything else. You can't encrypt or decrypt messages with it. You can't use it for digital signatures. You can only use it to protect keys while you're symmetric keys while you're sharing them. That's its remit. That's what it's best at. PKI, however, as we said earlier, is a group of technologies for secure communications using asymmetric public key encryption. It provides us with confidentiality through encryption, integrity through hashing, authentication, so that is its confirmation of parties in the communication through our digital signatures and our signatures, and non-repudiation, also from our signatures, because non-repudiation means that a sender or a receiver of a message cannot deny that they've either sent it or received it in the future because of the fact that we use these signatures. There's a quick little video here that I'm going to play for you. It gives you a real breakdown, a really good breakdown of PKI in 5 minutes. So I'll try and keep quiet, and hopefully in my share, I have shared this out. So you should be able to hear this video. Let me know if you can, and I'll restart it. So 5 minutes, just have a listen to this explanation here.
PKI, or Public Key Infrastructure, is defined as a framework for managing digital certificates, encryption keys, and everything in between. It's the most important term in the cybersecurity world. Let's take a closer look at it to understand why. In this video, we'll take a look at the basics of public key cryptography, how it works, and the role digital certificates play in enabling PKI. The primary role of PKI is to establish identity and encrypt data flowing across the network, thus protecting sensitive information from being accessed by unauthorized parties. Public key cryptography is the system that makes this possible. It does so by employing a two-key system that makes it possible for both parties to verify each other's identities and then establish an encrypted connection between each other. You'll understand this better with an example. Assume you're trying to connect to a website from your computer. What actually happens here is your browser attempts to establish a connection with the web server that hosts the website. However, your browser must first verify the authenticity of the web server to ensure that the website is truly what it claims to be. After all, you don't want to end up on an illegitimate copy of a website that could end up stealing your personal information. The authentication process relies on asymmetric encryption, which is where the two-key system comes into play. Any entity on the network which leverages encryption possesses a public key and a private key. You can think of a key as an encryption tool, something that transforms plain text to ciphers, and vice versa. In the case of asymmetric encryption, anything encrypted using a public key can only be decrypted with the corresponding private key, and not with a copy of the same public key. Let's take a look at how they work in our browser web server example. First, your browser requests the server to present its public key. Public key information is accessible online and is not secret. The server complies by sending the browser a copy of its public key, and the browser uses it to encrypt a temporary session key, which it sends back to the server. Now, if the web server is legitimate, it will possess a secret private key that corresponds to its public key, which can be used to decrypt the session key. Once it informs the...
So just to interrupt there on that one, so that's, this is talking about, well, could typically talk about RSA in this particular example, but that's exactly what Diffie-Hellman does as well there. So encrypts that session key.
Browser that it has succeeded in doing so, the browser takes it as a confirmation that it is legitimate and opens up an encrypted communication channel with it. This entire process ensures that any unauthorized third party cannot intercept this communication channel without possessing the designated keys. However, there's a loophole in the system. What if a hacker was masquerading as the web server after somehow obtaining its public and private keys? Your browser would be incapable of verifying ownership of the initial private key transaction without some additional information to do so. This additional information is what digital certificates provide. Digital certificates, also called SSL/TLS certificates, are proof that an entity is the legal owner of its encryption keys. They're issued by trusted bodies called certificate authorities, or CAs, which are responsible for generating, digitally signing, and selling certificates to a requester after verifying its legitimacy. CAs take particular care to verify that the requester is the legitimate owner of the domain for which a certificate is being requested. Only then does it provide them with a signed certificate that can be attached to their public key. Now, how does this fit into our browser server example? When your browser requests the web server to produce its public key, the server will also send the certificate that possesses the CA's digital signature, along with other details that will allow the browser to confirm that it is actually transacting with the web server. Thus, the digital certificate serves to legitimize the entire transaction from the get-go, thus establishing full trust and credibility in both parties. In fact, any website that lacks a certificate is immediately flagged as suspicious by most browsers, which results in the infamous SSL certificate error that stops people from accessing the website. To summarize, everything we discussed so far, from asymmetric encryption to keys to digital certificates, constitutes what is known as PKI. Did you find this video useful? Tell us what you...
Yes.
So there you go. So that's all of that in a nutshell. Hopefully that's reiterated a lot of the stuff that we've gone through this evening. All right. No, we don't want to see you again. Go away. So, common challenges that PKI solves. So, as demonstrated in the video, solves the man-in-the-middle attacks because of the whole purpose of the signing and the signatures and digital certificates. It manages certificates for us. So the CAs and do that for us. They distribute and use the certificate services, and it helps us to maintain the security of our digital world. Now, you can, of course, have internal systems where you can generate your own digital certificates without having to go through the CA, but these are not going to be necessarily going to be trusted out in the real world. Okay, so they're things that you would use within your own organization on your own private links, but you're not going to send those out into the wild. If you want to have proper legitimacy out in the wild, then you need to have something generated by a certificate authority. Common uses of PKI include, as I said in the video, the SSL and TLS certificates for our web browsing and comms, digital signatures on our different software platforms, and communications platforms. Helps us to restrict access to our enterprise intranet and VPNs. Okay, using these different components of PKI, all the way from our encryption algorithms, all the way up to our hashing and our digital signatures. Allows us to have some password-free Wi-Fi access based on device ownership. So using certificates to associate, rather than having to just use passwords, which of course we know can be compromised, and facilitates email and data encryption. So there's some of the more common uses of PKI. So it's literally everywhere around us, and encryption, therefore, is everywhere around us as well. All right, so thankfully we've got through the slides in a little bit over time, but not too bad for me. Learning tasks this week. So there's a number of activities on Moodle site. And the one I particularly want you to pay attention to is the one involving the spreadsheet, which I've built and plugged in a number of different values into that spreadsheet. There's a number of cells that are hard that I've coded in, and I've said, leave those alone. Well, you can play with them if you want, but I would encourage you to try with different prime values to the ones that are already in that spreadsheet. I think I've used the same ones as in the example this evening, just to provide some continuity, but I'd encourage you to play around them and see what breaks. So try, for example, a couple of primes that result in a value of n that is less than 26. And then if you try to encrypt a message that has one of those later letters in the alphabet, so say if you put a Z in it, that is value 26, you'll find that the encryption will break down. It will actually when it's decrypted, it'll come out to be a different value. And that's because of that rule that we have to, the message text has to be less than the value of n. So the value of n has to be higher. And if it's not, the encryption breaks down. Now, of course, the other way to look at it too is that Excel, it's only Excel. So if you put two larger primes in it, or you come up with a value of n that is too large. So say if you use a couple of the later primes, like a 17 and a 19, and you multiply those together, that will actually generate a value of n which is too large for Excel to handle, which is kind of annoying, but it is what it is. So there's only a limited value of small primes you can use, but hopefully you'll get a bit of a feel through playing around with it, the mathematics behind it and how the RSA algorithm works, and gain an appreciation for the fact that if you have really large primes, so such large primes that they result in a 716-digit, a decimal digit key, public key, then you'll get an appreciation for just how hard it is to factorize or break the RSA encryption algorithm, particularly with key sizes of that size. And then have a look at the Module 3 Quizlet. And of course, next week, we're going to be looking at hashing. And then after that, it'll only be the final exam that you'll need to look at. So we're getting towards the end of it, unfortunately. It's actually been quite interesting so far. So hopefully you found all that discussion on RSA and PKI interesting. And I guess now it's time to go through our questions, Guy.
Yes, and I think they'll not just have to look at the exam, but perhaps do a fair bit of revision if they're anything like me. Thank you, Matt. That was pretty cool. There's a fair few questions, of course, so everyone can hang around if they like. Let's start with the most recent ones. Sholto asks, so how does a browser validate a certificate? Can you just go over that again? Does it access a database over the internet to look up that certificate?
More or less, yeah. So it will, once you send out that certificate, it's got to be able to verify that through a certificate authority. And that's why they're stored. So the certificate authority, as part of the PKI infrastructure, manages the distribution and the verification of the signatures that we send out. So that's what I was saying before. If you were to generate a signature privately, generate your own digital signature using your Windows server, and then try to use that on the internet, then it's going to break down because it's not able to be verified by a certificate authority. So web browsers will, or any application that uses that infrastructure, will use the CAs as part of the PKI to verify that.
Thank you. Thanks, Sholto. When we give one more minute for folks to send questions in, and then Hannah, if you could please shut them off after that. Fiani is wondering whether the CAs can get and their certificates be hacked, and what the likelihood of that is, and how hard that would be.
They can, and they have been before. So yeah, so certificate authorities obviously are some of the most heavily protected entities on the internet, but they have been known to be hacked and compromised at different times in the past. And when that happens, everything that has been certified by that CA effectively becomes suspicious and null and void. So there's a need to replace all those certificates that have been generated if we want to be completely paranoid about it. And that's the best way to be, is just assume that if certificate authority has been hacked and compromised, that everything's been compromised and we need to start from scratch again. So, but there's not just one certificate authority, there's lots of them, lots of places that can do it, but they certainly have been attacked in the past and compromised, yes.
So this might be a related question. Why can't a bad actor also send a certificate copied from the legit website?
Oh, they can, absolutely. And the other thing that they can do is they can, it is possible for CAs to be fooled as well. Or even if you don't look at the signature side of things, it is possible for me, to example, to generate a public-private key pair pretending to be someone else. And if the person I send the public key to, thinks that I am that person. So say, for example, Guy, I create a key pair and say I'm you, and then I send the public key that's ostensibly from you to someone else in order to get information from them that should be destined for you. If they don't go and check it out and make sure that it's legit, then that's absolutely a problem that has occurred many times before. So there's no doubt that the PKI system will break down if it's not used or not, the principles behind it are not adhered to. So if people are careless with the way they use it, then absolutely it's going to break down. But that's the same no matter what security system you look at.
And what's mine is yours, Matt, so just go for it. We've got a couple of, oh, we've got so many questions. All right, well, let's just go back up to the top and we'll go through them methodically. Okay. Elon Musk is wondering, I wonder, looking over this week's activity, is there a Linux alternative to Cryptool?
Not that I'm aware of, but you can use a web version of it. So you can use it in the web browser without having to download it.
I just say buy another computer, Elon, you psycho.
Wow.
Oh, and congratulations on reaching number 2. Can you explain the need for CA from Jay very early in the night? Say a PGP has private and public key to encrypt and decrypt. Why need a third party? And also, let's say, what's PGP?
So PGP is pretty good privacy. So it's just it's literally as simple as that. So it's just a package or a suite of packages that allows you to generate your own public-private keys. And I actually sort of answered that question just before. And I think it's probably been answered since Jay's actually answered that question. So the need for the certificate of authority comes if you want to have verified digital signatures as part of your PKI system. If all you want is a public-private key and you're just going to use it for simplified and communicate with backwards and forwards with people, then you don't need a CA. But if, say, for example, you've got a website and you want to have a verified website with a verified signature, then you would need a CA for that.
And I think we've also answered Joa Fatima's question in the course of the evening. And also, Phil, as well, we've been answering this, I guess, through the course. What specs would quantum computing need to achieve to compromise the security of PKI?
Oh, no,
it's like it's made more complex by the fact that as the quantum computers grow, in the malicious actors, it'd also be growing in the defensive actors as well, wouldn't it? So.
Yeah, advice, but exactly right. Specs, no idea, to be completely frank. As I said, the largest quantum computer at the moment with semi-stable qubits is around the 77, 78 qubits or something like that. So, and it's, we're talking massive amounts of processing power, far outstripping anything that most of us could imagine at this stage. And in terms to get to that 4,099 perfectly stable qubits, I mean, we're not even close to having the hardware for that. But, in terms of running something much smaller just for a bit of fun, not 100% sure, to be honest. It's a bit outside quantum computing is a bit outside my league, unfortunately. So sorry, I can't answer that one directly. When
the course survey comes, ask for a quantum computing short course. see what happens.
Stop it.
Yeah, and just ask Elon, he's probably got one lying around. Is there something about the private key that means it can only be used as a private key, or are they interchangeable to the private and public?
No, they're interchangeable. So we have sort of spoken about that. You can use, they always have to be in the same pair. So you can't, for example, take the private key out of one public-private key pair and give it to and associate it with another public key from another public-private key pair, because they're mathematically interrelated as per the mathematics that we've just gone through. But you can use it to encrypt or decrypt, so it's one or the other. And if you were to just take them as two different keys, it doesn't matter which way you use them or who does decryption or which one does encryption, they still end up being exactly the same. The only reason we call one private is because we have to keep one secret. Mathematically, doesn't matter which way you go, but we just call it a public and private key because, as we know, the secrecy of our encryption relies on the secrecy of, in asymmetric encryption, at least one key. Whereas symmetric encryption, it's the one and only key we have to keep secret. But yeah, there's no reason why you can't use either interchangeably.
Beauty. There's a few questions that will just be a bit above my head, folks, so sorry if I repeat them. let's go with Andrews though. One last one on PKI for now. Is the public key linked? Oh, sorry, not PKI, public key, or certified to an email or a person, or I guess what is the entity that it is actually tied to?
Well, it's tied to, if it's not certified, it's just generated, then it's tied to whatever the identity is within that public key. So part of it involves, particularly if you look at certificates, part of that involves putting name and address and all that sort of stuff in as well. So that's tied to a specific person or a specific corporation. But in terms of the public-private keys, they're not really tied to anyone specifically, and that's why it's really important that we have these digital signatures and to prove that this particular key belongs to this particular person. And that's where that PKI comes in, that you generate your public-private keys, put them onto a certificate authority who verifies your identity in relationship to those keys, and then it signs on your behalf to say, yes, these keys are from this particular person. But if you didn't go through that process and use the CA, then they're not particularly tied to anyone.
Thank you.
From a mathematical sense, there's nothing to tie them back to you.
Right, yeah, we got an interesting question from Tony. In order to encourage some kids learning timetables, I told them if they figure out how to reverse the timetables or factorize integers effectively, 1, they will be instant billionaires, and 2, they will stop most of the e-commerce for at least 3 months. Are these two statements true?
Probably not. I wouldn't have thought so. But in order to be able to do, I couldn't comment on A, unless of course B was true and B is not true. Because in order to be able to factorize the numbers that we're talking about, the size of the numbers that are used in e-commerce encryption, otherwise known as, for example, RSA, not going to happen in this lifetime.
More than 7?
Assuming that is, that the key size is adequate. So if it's 2048 bits long, for example, or 617 decimal digits long, then I guarantee no one, it doesn't matter how good you are at factorization, you are not going to break that sucker. If people are using 3 and 7 as their prime numbers, like we just did, then both of those statements could possibly be true if that was the size of our prime numbers in use. But it's not. So I cast aspersions onto your statements A and B.
Perhaps we should pit short course enthusiasts against each other in some kind of factorizing of integers competition in like a 5th Zoom meeting or something.
Well, I think we would be safe in saying we could offer a prize of say
2 credits in a master's.
2 credits in a master's if you can factorize RSA 2048.
I've already offered that. No, just for the winner of the competition. I'm giving them out like I don't know, confetti.
No,
Let's just go with that.
All right, sounds good to me.
How fast are machines like Prism, X-Keyscore, and Tempera? Can they break the RSA 2048?
No.
There you go.
Short, because we've already discussed that in our answers about the competition. So no.
So these are just really good computers. They're not the basic quantums.
No, they're fairly serious computers, but they're not. In that example, we said quantum with 4099 stable qubits to do it in 10 seconds. So that then implies that something with a lot less qubits could do it in a slightly longer period of time, like an hour or a day or a week or something like that, which is, theoretically possible, of course. But when we scale it all the way back to the fact that we've only got about, that high 70s unstable qubits, and as at this stage, no one has put their hand up to say we have factorized RSA 2048. And I guarantee that if they had, unless they were, NSA or someone like that, it would be all over the place, because it's still a massive carrot under many people's noses, mathematicians' noses. I have to say no, they're not going to be able to factorize it anytime soon.
All right. I think we might have answered this one. What happens if your PT is larger than the fire calculation?
Oh yeah, sort of with it, it will break down.
Yep, that's so there's more letters in the alphabet than there are.
Yeah, in a nutshell, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Someone asked in the chat, I think, what happens with special characters like spaces and punctuation and that sort of stuff?
Oh, well, see, this is what I'm saying. When you, I'm just using really simple examples, but obviously all characters are encryptable, because at the end of the day, they're converted into ASCII code. So they're converted into binary somewhere along the way. And so, the same applies. Obviously, when you get to something like ASCII, then you've got, much higher potential decimal numbers before you then convert into binary. And so your N number has to be larger again to obviously cater for all those different values. But
right.
It doesn't matter what characters you use, they're all encryptable.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. All right. There's some Arcnegum questions about the numbers 47 and 89 specifically. A couple of them been got rid of. Why do we factorize numbers with the encryption? Could you go over that one more time for Tony?
Well, we don't factorize numbers. What we're trying to do, and this is why we use prime numbers, because prime numbers can only be factored by themselves or one. And so if we have sufficiently large prime numbers and we multiply them together, they produce a number that is, it's almost impossible to factorize. I mean, it's a time frame thing, a processing time thing, and a mathematical thing. So the examples I was giving with factorization was just to show that what the process is, and that it's an important component of RSA, in that it's important from the perspective that it becomes really, really difficult to do when you get two really large prime numbers and you multiply them together, trying to then find out what those two prime numbers are. So the factors is really, really difficult to do in terms of a time and resource thing. Because if you take the result of those two numbers, it's not just as simple as doing the method we went through, divide by 2, and then you're left with a number that you can divide by 2 until you get all the way down to 1. You've got to have knowledge of what those two prime numbers are in order to factorize that larger number, so that public key. So it's just an important concept to understand what factorization is, and the numbers I used were easily factorized. So that's which is not what you want in encryption. You want two really large prime numbers, multiply them together, come up with an even bigger number that becomes almost impossible to find what those original prime numbers were. So the P and the Q. Okay,
thank you. Fiona's got an interesting question. Can two different sets of prime numbers produce the same number? I guess at the numbers the size of the numbers we're talking about, anything's possible, but perhaps unlikely. Or is it just a mathematical impossibility?
No, it's possible. Yeah, it is possible. Two sets of prime numbers could produce the same number, and this is why we use massive prime numbers. But say if I'm trying to think of a really simple example, which for some reason I can't off the top of my head at the moment. But yes, it is possible. Yes.
All right. Geez, there's so many questions that are perhaps a little bit above my head. Scott wonders, might a DDoS attack be too many requests for a server public key?
Oh, it could be. Yeah, I mean, a DDoS attack is just overflowing of traffic to any service. So, yeah.
Would it be strange for them to choose to use that very specific request?
I've never heard of anyone doing that, no.
Okay.
But anytime you have too much traffic going to a particular port or to a particular service, then that can result in a denial of service.
Okay. But a lot of these questions are just above my head. So if you've got any that you are really keen on answering, I might defer to you.
Okay, I can flick through these.
And
Okay.
I'll see if I can sort through some other ones while you're doing it.
NB's made a comment, A times B only has two factors and they're both prime. Not sure there's a question in that.
Might be responding to.
It could be. What is the word length in RSA 2048 in bits? So word length in RSA 2048. Word length refers to 2 bytes, which is 16 bits. So there's the math there for you. Divide that by 16. I think that's what you're getting at, Christian.
It has a public key 617 digits long, if that's helpful.
Yeah, so the 617 is decimal digits, and each of those decimal digits is 8 bits. So that's where you get to, if you multiply that out, that will get you to 2048. Yeah. All right, so RSA decryption calculation, you mentioned, how do you get this, please? Oh, okay, quick question, RSA decryption calculation. Let me just go back. Okay, decryption calculation. Hey, okay, 201.2197 mod n. Yeah, so if you take, so what that is, that's modular mathematics. So 2197 divided by 33 equals 66.5 or 6 or something. Let me work that. 66.577. So that 0.57 times 33 equals, if you take all the decimal points, rounds out to 19. So it's modular mathematics, which means we take this value here, the decryption, the ciphertext raised to the decryption key, we take that value, we divide it by 33, and then whatever the remainder is, so whatever's left over, because 33 won't go into that an even amount of time, or if it does, it'll be the letter, it won't be the letter A because I've used 1 for A. But if we divide that by 33, it comes out at 66 and a bit over half, and that half represents 90, half of 33, around about half of 93, or a bit under, a bit over rather, which ends up being 19. So it's a remainder of that particular division.
Thanks, Bill.
I have an X509 certificate structure example, not available immediately, no, but I can find one and provide some information on Moodle about that.
All right, I'll take a note.
How does the OTP, so one-time pad, I assume you're talking about, mechanism work within RSA? So the one-time pad is really just about generating a key stream. Okay, so a stream of ones and zeros. So that's not really how RSA works. So in the standard RSA algorithm, it doesn't implement OTP at all, really. What is phi, and how do we know that the private key cannot be derived from the public key and the ciphertext? The reason you can't derive it is, well, it can be derived theoretically, but it's just because the prime numbers being used are so large, and that the factorization just takes a very long time to be able to do. So it's not that theoretically it's possible to do, it's just practically impossible. Is the answer to that one. In terms of what is phi, so phi is what's called Euler's quotient, and it's simply a mathematical function that is required by RSA, and what it does is it works out a particular number, in this case 20, which is derived from the P and the Q, so the 2 primes that you come up with. The phi function, or Euler's quotient, works out a particular number which you then use to derive the encryption key. Okay, so these numbers here, so you don't actually use the quotient number itself, well, you potentially if it happens to fit within these two conditions here, but you use it to define the range between 1 and the fine number, the range of numbers that you have available to you to pick the encryption key from. So that's what it's used for. So hopefully I answered that question. So when encryption breaks due to M greater than N, what does this mean? E.g. scramble ciphertext so it can't be recovered. Now what it actually does, interestingly, is in this case here, let's say our N number was 20. Okay, so what happens when we go to decrypt this number here, we effectively will end up, instead of, we know that it's T, if our N number was 20, for example, and then we ended up, that would then convert to 1, which instead of being a T, which it was when we first encrypted it, it would end coming out as an A. So it'll just give you a dodgy character. So it'll still decrypt. The encryption and decryption itself will still work, but the mathematics will be such that the value will potentially come, well, not potentially, will come out as a value that is different from the one which you originally had. So well, I'm not going to do the maths here in my head at the moment because that'd be crazy man stuff. But if the N value is less than the value of the plain text here, so if it's in this case, or the same, so if it's 20 or lower, then this particular, or if it's 17, for example, it would end up meaning that the T, the R, and the S would decrypt as a different value, a lower value, so a number earlier on in the alphabet than what they would if the value is above 26 in this case. So if we had a value that was 20, then those 3 letters would decrypt as smaller letters that are earlier in the alphabet. And so then when you decrypt, you go, what does that mean? It wouldn't make sense. So it would effectively be just a jumble of characters. And if you had the unfortunate occurrence of, say, using all letters in the first part of the alphabet, so say if you just encrypted add, so 414, and your another way around. So if you were to use the letters higher up the alphabet here, and your N value was say 4, then anything above that, when you decrypted it, would not result in the same value that it started off as, and so you'd end up with a whole heap of 1s, 2s, and 3s, and it'd just be a conglomeration of ABCs. So it would not look correct. It would be silly. So if Diffie-Hellman and RSA can both be used for key exchange, is there an advantage over one or the other? Diffie-Hellman's just made exactly for that, so that's why, and that's all it does. So that's why it's used for it. But there's no reason why you couldn't implement that part of RSA to also do your key exchange as well. But RSA is generally not implemented in that particular way. So it's only there's a part of RSA that you could use. Diffie-Hellman is a little different, it's a little faster. RSA is just the whole box and dice, so not typically implemented in that way. What type of encryption would a fax machine utilise? Good golly. Is a viable means of data communication in the 21st? I couldn't answer that question, to be honest. I have absolutely no idea what who even has a fax machine nowadays.
Show yourselves. It depends what you want to use it for, Matt. Like it's another depends question.
Yeah, I guess you could say that way if I wanted to cover my butt, but no, I've got to just give that a straight out. I have no idea.
Andrew in the chat says fax wouldn't have encryption.
Well, I've never. Well,
and Hanny says run length encoding.
There are probably implementations of certain algorithms in the encoding of fax which you could ostensibly use or think of as encryption, but no, I've never heard of encrypted faxes, and I don't know. I can't answer that question. Nice one, Adam. If you got the answer, if you just sort of trying to wind us up, by all means, give us that answer.
And Adam, do you use a fax machine?
I hope not. So Gregor said, does successful decryption always mean determining the entire plain text message? I'm thinking repeated partial decryption, maybe of a known or suspected plain text segments, might be a way of building up the full decryption. Does that make sense? Yeah, it does, because that's almost exactly what the Enigma team, Alan Turing and his team did with Enigma. They knew part of the text and they just eventually broke down through it. So, but it is unlikely, for the reasons that we've gone over in terms of computational feasibility and factorization of numbers and resources required, all that sort of stuff. It would be unlikely that you would partially decrypt the message. If you could partially decrypt it, I would suggest that you would in fact be able to encrypt the entire thing. So I think that would be unlikely. But if for example you did a cryptanalysis type attack where you knew that there was some sort of word, like Enigma did, there was some sort of words in it, and you could identify certain patterns, then there might be some way. But yeah, I mean, that's drawing a long bow, I think. If you can partially decrypt, you should be able to completely decrypt. Okay, Corsair BHI Terry, interesting name. It says, can we get a brief overview at some point of what post-quantum cryptography is doing differently to resist to adversary descriptions? Can't be just longer keys. We're not, we won't be talking anymore about quantum cryptography. That was really just an example to show how difficult it was to break into RSA, but it might be the subject for another course some stage in the future. Morris Newman has said, whilst I agree with you use your private key in sending communication to prove who you are, if it was for signing rather than encrypting the payload, what's the point of encrypting something that the public key can decrypt? That is a good point. You can, certainly you would generally use it more for signing than you would for encrypting. So if you were trying to, and I probably didn't make that clear enough, you can use public and private key to encrypt and decrypt either way, right? But you're right, Morris is right, in that if I was going to send something, say to Guy, instead of encrypting it with my private key so that anyone who intercepted could just use my public key to decrypt, which they could, I would actually use his public key to encrypt and send to him. So it's a good point. When you're encrypting to someone else, you would generally use their public key and sign it. And if you were going to sign something, you would use your private key to prove that it actually came from you. So yes, that is a very good, it is a good point. I probably didn't make that clear enough, that you wouldn't normally encrypt something with your private key and send it out in the wild, because then anyone who has that public key would be able to decrypt it.
You lucky 260 odd people left behind.
I'll be in the recording anyway, so yeah. So that's all right. But yeah, I probably
thanks, Morris.
That was a good clarifying question. Kudos there, Morris. Hats off to you. And last one, I think. Let's say a service is hosted in a public portal using ASE, but the private key, ASE, I'm not sure what that is, but anyway, but the private key shared to the trust partner, but the partner shares it to the developer. Now the developer has left the partner copy in there. I think what that's saying, trying to say there is a private key has been shared. And if a private key has been shared, then your encryption is going to be broken. Simple as that. And the way you overcome that is you do not share your private key. That is the whole point of the private key being private, that you must maintain the secrecy. That's with symmetric encryption, as we said, the most important thing is to keep the symmetric key secure. In asymmetric encryption, you must keep your private key secure. If you don't, then all bets are off, is the answer to that one. So don't share your private key, don't let that happen. And if it does, get some new keys is the way to avoid that, to stop that from happening.
Or stop locking your door. These are the options.
That seems like it.
Well done, Matt. And well done, everyone, for sticking around. Hey, next week we'll be talking about hashing. That's right.
We will.
Yes, and we'll tell you all about the exam. All of your questions will be answered about the exam, and don't worry
Well,
too much
maybe not
about
all
it.
the questions, because someone's probably, I guarantee there'll be one person who's asked for the answers to the questions.
Well, we'll
Won't
answer
answer that one.
very firmly in the negative. Thank you, Hannah, for hanging around. Enjoy the time in Lou. Thank you, Matt, as ever, and thank you, everyone, for sticking around. I'll hand over to you, Matt, to say goodbye. Or
Well,
actually, yeah, maybe you could encrypt the answers. That'd be a good thing. You could encrypt the answers to the test and do it all for love and spend all of your week doing it.
That's a great idea. No, it's a stupid idea, but so on that note, I will thank you for your contribution as ever, except for that last little bit, because that was ridiculous.
Get knotted.
Thank you, Anna, for turning up and doing all the wonderful administration stuff you do in the background to stop Guy and I having to do it, which would be quite difficult. And last of all, thank you to everyone that's turned up. Really good numbers tonight and stayed around for the Q&A session. So as Guy said, next week we've got hashing, some good fun to be had there. Same time next week. We'll catch you then. Stay safe and well, and enjoy the rest of your week.